you spend a moment making a distinction between the prevailing practice that's happening across the country, AKA school improvement,
Yeah.
right? It goes back to 1984.
Sure.
It's embedded in lots of state and federal legislation. Every practitioner in the room is confronted with developing something like a school improvement plan
Sure.
for one reason or another. The distinction between such and what you're describing as high reliable schools.
Sure. You said you were going to ask me easy questions. You said
I
they were
did
going to
not.
be
I'm just trying to get some of your icon on me, right? That's all I'm
Okay.
trying.
You said they were going to be multiple choice.
I didn't say that either, and I lied. If I did, I lied, right?
That's a great question. Well, for a couple things, the school reform movement, the school effectiveness movement, which you're right, this goes back to the 70s, late 70s, as a matter of fact. And that was the great Ron Edmonds, Wilbur Brookover, Larry Lizotte, and those folks. And we're still kind of doing the same thing. And it was a good movement. Basically, it said, hey, we know, because we talked about the correlates in those days. And the correlates were just variables that correlate with student achievement. And back in late 70s, that was a big deal. Nobody had really done that before. But we still approach it from the same perspective, and that perspective, I would say, is one where it's intervention-based. And let me explain that. Say, well, do this. Bring in PLCs. Teach. Use this reading program, use this writing program, use this teacher, these instructional strategies. That's intervention-based. High reliability perspective is not intervention-based, it's more outcomes-based. And actually they have terms for it, leading and lagging indicators, which come from the business world. A leading indicator is something you're doing that hope you create a good, some good end. A lagging indicator is whether or not that end actually occurred. It seems backward to me. I had to ask an economist friend of mine, after I said, I still don't get it. What's a leading indicator? What's a lagging indicator? He said, well, here, Bob, do you remember in 2008 when the market crashed and your retirement went from that big to that big? I said, yeah. He said, that was a leading indicator. I said, well, what's a lagging indicator? He said, well, you can't retire until you're 94. And so funny way to put, but that's, so we're, the school effectiveness movement is do this intervention. High reliability perspective says, well, do those interventions, but as important, or more important, identify what do you expect those things to do and monitor that. And trying to monitor it in a way that's kind of like a FOD walk. You get quick data, and you're usually patting yourself on the back, but when you're not, then you say, what do we have to do? The PLC process that we've had in place for 2 years really isn't producing the results that they should produce. I think that's the biggest distinction right there.
Yeah, so let's press that envelope just a tiny little better, because the school improvement movement, as you rightly described it, always had dollars associated with it.
Sure.
Right? So, you get identified, you get required to make a school improvement plan. Your requirement is to reorganize your resources to align with whatever that plan happens to be. Is there a corresponding set of requirements for high reliability schools? That is, do we have to adjust budgets to do the elements of the high reliability strategy that you're laying out here?
Well, it was designed in such a way that ideally you don't have to.
Interesting.
Here's why. Money just is not the answer, although money is useful. I can't tell you how many SIG schools with actually sometimes over $1 million don't produce results. They have so many interventions going on that they actually work against each other. And I've been part of that a couple times. Right. We were one of the interventions. And but we were one intervention with another 4, and there were no evil people in the process. We were trying to do our best. It was just at cross purposes. So I thought, oh my gosh. And so the tack we take now with SIG School, we say, look, here's what we do. If you're going to work with us, work with us. But if you're going to have 4 other, don't. Right. Pick one and work with them. So it's not money. It's really not. One reason I can say that, most of what I just said, there are resources that are absolutely free that are available now. We know so much, and there's so many products and practices that you really don't have to pay for. I think it does take a commitment in terms of time, professional development, a shift in leadership, and I'm sure there'd be some shifting of the budget. Actually in Baltimore, again, I'm really enamored with Baltimore because it's such a big, they've got a one-to-one initiative going. 110,000 students. I said, how'd you pay for that? And they said it wasn't with grant money.
Interesting.
What they did is they just shifted their budget priorities, and they found enough, dollars. That's there's a lot of money in that system, obviously, but it wasn't grant money. It was all just, state allocated per pupil expenditure. So I'm sure there'd be that type of shifting going on.
So I should announce to everyone that Dr. Marzano's book is available, High Reliability Schools. It's available for sale downstairs. But I've read the book backwards and forwards, along with some other things that you've written. John Hattie's research is a centerpiece.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
All those key elements, key factors
Sure.
In the book. There are 4 of them that are outside the control of the practitioner.
Yeah.
Right? Poverty, family background, performer achievement, and like that. So this question really is important in a state like Mississippi, right? Plagued with all the conditions in the state,
Yeah.
not the least of which is the socioeconomic background of many of our students.
Sure.
What do we do about these factors that are beyond the practitioner's control?
Well, out of John's first 50,
Right.
as you mentioned, those 4 that we can't control,
Can't
which
control.
means there are, I can't do it, 46 that we can.
Yeah, and
But
the spirit of the question goes,
I don't understand what you're doing.
yeah. I mean, so, a common explanation for not getting done
I got it.
are the external factors beyond the practitioner.
I got it.
So I'm trying to push you to get
No. You're absolutely legitimate to ask that question. They're out of the control of the school, yes, but out of the way we ran school in the past. That's why I always start with that whole self-system, metacognitive system. I think, no kidding, you get kids, you start motivating kids, you start building in self-actualization, connection to something greater than self, and that can overcome even the direst of situations. And I don't want to underestimate, a student who comes from a certain background, doesn't have all those experiences that my kids have had, really does start, climbing a much steeper ladder than my students, my kids. But I think we can address those. When you add, no kidding, I really meant it, on a daily basis, so weekly inspiration, stories of people, ideally from the community, who've accomplished great things. You just don't know what mind you're changing. Oh, one of my favorite stories, this is years ago now, because I've been talking about this for a long time. It was in Georgia, and I was talking about, having students identify, there was work, I'm sorry, I'm babbling. Hazel Marcus does a lot of work on what she calls future possible selves, and what she says is, hey, that's a big thing. Very successful people at a very early age kind of dreamed, about what they could possibly be. And those visions had to be, powerful and attainable. But a lot of kids, we just kind of give those up. You say, I can't do that, my background. And she said she was a high school English teacher, and the last year of school, the senior year, she would have kids have a double, what a double entry journal is? Students write, and then it's kind of like the Freedom Writers, and the teacher put it in a certain shelf, the students put it in a certain shelf, that meant they wanted the teacher to respond, so she would respond. She said she had one kid, just a great kid, came from a big family, really nice, good athlete, but he wrote, because she had said, what do you want to be when you get out of here? What's the future for you? And he said, I want to be a professional football player. He said, I want to go to the University of Georgia and play football, and then I want to play for the Dallas Cowboys. And she was such a great kid, we came from a great family, but she said, I don't want him to get hurt. What great aspiration. So here's what she wrote. Herschel. If you're a football fan, Herschel Walker,
Right.
who did play for the University of Georgia, won the Heisman Trophy and played for Dallas. And so you never know whose mind you're just right there, and all they need is this little bit of encouragement. And if you think about, no kidding, on a daily basis, why don't we have those conversations, a story, a video clip? Why don't we start but then you add that with backfilling. That's why I always add vocabulary. Some of these things are pretty straightforward. Tier 1 words, make sure they know those. It's not rocket science. So if we do that inspirational stuff, but also are smart about wide reading, vocabulary, and those students are easy to identify, that don't have those, and don't work from a deficit perspective. Work from, okay, we need you to shore you up in this, and that's going to get you an equal playing field. So I think we can do both.
Right.
Work both ends.
Let me shift a little bit. There's so much to really talk about, but in this era of accountability, AKA high stakes testing,
Yeah.
It's notable to me that neither in your presentation nor in your book is there a big assessment, high-stakes testing sort of treatment. But in this state, as is the case in lots of other states, there is the presence of this high-stakes testing.
Understood.
I want to get you to talk a little bit about the recurring shift in the testing and assessment strategy. So in the state of Mississippi, we're getting ready to have a brand new assessment.
Yeah.
It's going to just happen this spring, first time administered.
Sure.
What say you about assessment as the driver behind
I got it.
schooling and learning
sure.
and the like, right?
Well, it's not going to go away. I know that.
Well, thank you for that. That's bad news. I thought, I thought we brought the icon here. He would come and say, "No more testing."
No, it's not going to go away.
Not going to go away.
But for testing to make decisions about individual students just doesn't work.
Does not work.
No, you can't. I mean, the metrics on that, I didn't go into that, but the precision for an individual student is so bad, that we just can't rely on those. However, to look at a school or look at a district, then it gets a little bit better. The testing has changed. It is changing to more constructive response type items. I meant it when I said if you're going to pick anything, pick the supporting claims. Can't go wrong with that one. And there's about a half a dozen others that, if we taught this stuff, we've got a leg up. Testing is a unique thing. It really is. I mean, it's its own task. I know statistics really well because I've studied statistics. I'm not gifted by far. But I'll tell you something. You put me in front of a test item in statistics, it really is. So why not just recognize that? So step one, identify those topics that we know are going to be addressed in tests. Teach those. All of them are ones, that was our little study I mentioned, 698 topics. You would agree on all of them. It's all good stuff. Make sure we teach those, in the curriculum. Let's make them smart about, when they take tests. It's an artificial task. Here's some things to do. Use your notes, do all that stuff. So handle that. But then make sure at the individual student level we use proficiency scales and trend scores. See, now we've got something to defend. Now we can say, okay, you want to see how much our kids, we took your state test, we realize that, it's good information, we'll continue, but you want to see our analysis of how much they've learned, and we can show you at the individual student level who's learning a lot, who's learning a little, and these are things teachers have taught, and we've designed the assessments for them.
This is interesting. Are you making a distinction between the qualitative and the quantitative data that exists in a student's life, in a school, capturing that, using it for reporting purposes?
See, I wouldn't call it qualitative, though. I wouldn't call it. See, I think everything quantitative is when you put a number on it.
You put a number on it.
As soon as you put a number on it. So proficiency scale is not qualitative, it's quantitative. If we just labeled them, then it would be qualitative. But I am making a distinction between the tests that are designed for a whole bunch of people versus at the individual student level. And I don't think you can get to the individual student level by using external assessments. It's just you have to create so many. But we can get, and then if you broaden your notion of what assessment is, the obtrusive, unobtrusive, student generated, and we can be very, very precise about those in an imprecise world. We're trying to measure things that are not, it's not like measuring a table. We're measuring what's inside a student's mind. That's hard to do.
So there are all kinds of extensions of this conversation. I'm trying to get through all of it. Excuse me if I'm too personal here, right? If none of this makes any difference to you, just pardon me. I'm learning as well, right? So I'm sitting with this icon, so it's important to take advantage. When we talk curriculum instruction, right, which is what the intent and focus of this session today is all about, when we have this conversation, we have a way of expanding the bucket as opposed to narrowing it. I think I'm hearing you say, with regard to curriculum instruction, too much to do.
Yep.
We're being asked to do too much.
Yep.
State guides have 800 pages of stuff that they're asking us to do.
Can't do it.
You're saying, pare that down.
Yeah. Specifically 15 to 25 topics per grade level.
Out of 800.
Yeah, if you got 800, yeah.
What's the risk there?
Well, if you pick the right topics, there is none.
Aha.
Because, yeah, you see, if you know, because what's the accountability system? It's an external test.
Interesting.
The people who make those tests are the same people who've been making them. We know the topics on those tests. I don't like tests running the system, but it's a reality, and the things they test are good things. So I would say, look, we know what to do, and I even go so far as to say there's this thing called a test-taking skill. Why don't we teach students, here's what's going on when you take the test? Okay, there's another piece that not many people talk about. I don't know what you do here, but in a lot of states, the state test that is used to identify how well a school doing and how well a teacher doing does not count to the student. In other words, it has no effect on the student. Mm-hmm. Do you realize what that brings in? The error that brings in. I'm a student, I got to take this test, and by the way, Bob, has no bearing. That almost invalidates it right there. Right. So all those countries that we want to be like, their tests, like in China, we do a little bit of work with a Beijing high school lady in China. That Gaokao, that's their final test. That means a lot to the student. So when they take the Gaokao, it's not just used, to measure the school. It's used to measure the student. Now, I don't want to do that. I don't want a state test being the final determiner, but I'm just saying we have a system that we're using assessments that are far removed from the classroom, and students have no stake in it. So they're almost invalid by definition. They really are.
Got you. So now, let's push this on over just a little bit, because there's so many complementary and maybe even antagonistic elements here, right? So your highest level of a school being transformed takes us to a place where we're doing competency-based.
That'd be the highest level, yeah.
At the highest level of stuff, right? Is competency-based analysis or evaluation of student work based on tests, or
well, all of the stuff? Yeah, all the above.
All of the above.
Yeah. First of all, there are different versions of competency-based education. We've been in it as long as anybody, but I just gave you our model. We would have learning progressions or proficiency scales, multiple ways of assessing those, one being student-generated assessments, and of course we're going to still use our traditional assessments. Matter of fact, we recommend what we call safety net assessments, that they are traditional selected response, you're given to the student, they cover multiple topics, and if you're accurate in terms of how well students are doing using the rest, the student should be well on those, do well. If they don't do well, you say, wait a minute, let's go back here. So they're kind of in there as well, safety net, to make sure that we're not being too lenient or not being rigorous about, what we're assessing. So you'd use all of them, but it wouldn't just solely be the traditional obtrusive. You have those other forms of assessment too. Yeah.
So now this drives me to your reference to the cognitive psychologist Bob Sternberg, out of Yale.
Yeah.
Who has done really interesting work, continues to do interesting work. He has this little trilogy, right?
Yeah, his triarchic theory.
His triarchic theory, right?
Yeah.
Academic, creative, I'm forgetting the other.
I think you're doing Howard Gardner's. I think you're doing his.
No. Howard, so in my head, Howard Gardner is derivative from Bob Sternberg.
Yep.
Right? So
Sternberg probably say, okay,
Yeah, but that's how I would do it, right?
I got it. No, you're right. I see where you're going.
And Sternberg's triarchic theory really sort of speaks to these three elements of development that we all have.
Got it.
We're creative, we are practical, and we're academic.
I got it. Okay. Yes, you're right.
So, to what extent is that driving some of what you guys are doing in your reliability work?
Certainly, I had a chance to meet Sternberg and Gardner too, and they're seminal thinkers. They really are.
Right.
And they create these really big models.
Right.
That are revolutionary. And absolutely. I started as reading Sternberg's work and Gardner's work, and it just led me in a slightly different direction, and that is which I just gave 4 systems of thought.
4 systems.
And self-system being the seat of motivation. They're not educators, and that's not what I'm saying. They're trying to affect a much broader audience. And so they're what they put together are much more generalizable. I'm focused on education.
Well, the only reason I raise it is because the Sternberg work seems to capture where most of us live. Some of us have an academic propensity.
Sure.
Some have a creative propensity. And some of the best people on the planet are just frankly practical.
Sure.
They're your son who wanted to really do the automobile stuff and ends up being a pilot and the like, right?
Yeah.
That was what I think Bob Sternberg would call a practical set of knowledge and skill sets, but it had very little to do with his academic proficiency in school.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm just trying to figure out how this might play.
I see what you're saying,
in this high reliability sort of
I got
school
it.
experience.
Very nice.
Because our assessment strategy doesn't take that into
No,
account.
you're absolutely, no, that's
right?
just,
And very often our schools and curriculums are not organized with that kind of foci.
you got it, yeah.
So I'm just trying to get some reconciliation here. You raised Sternberg, set off a clock in my head.
Yeah, no, I got it.
So I'm trying to
Yeah.
press that envelope a little bit.
Yeah, and you remember the book Practical Intelligence?
I do remember the book
yeah,
Practical Intelligence. I
yeah, where
absolutely
he had,
do. Right.
he actually had chapters, I think, on people like milkmen. They had
Exactly right.
Most people are going, "What's a milkman?" They used to actually deliver milk, by the way. And he would analyze the difficulty. He would pick professions that academics would say, "Well, that's easy to do," and he would analyze the cognitive load. And I remember saying, being a politically incorrect milk person, was actually a very difficult thing because you had to organize the milk in such a way that, you made sure the ones that were the oldest got delivered first in all the route and all that stuff. And he said it was incredibly complex. One of the horse race handicappers, stuff like that. I see where you're going. Actually, for me, that fits nicely because once you get above the knowledge system, cognitive skills. See, the milk person and the handicapper for horses, they're using cognitive skills, they're using metacognitive skills. So those are generalizable anywhere you want to go. And so, at least in my head, it's very compatible because I was just saying, look, we can be a lot leaner on the academics. We really can.
That's interesting. I mean, that's where I'm really going, right? Because I'm trying to figure out how we escape the tyranny of the testing and the so-called academics, right?
Yeah.
That's predisposed to a certain set of the student population. Not everyone lives there. Your son is a prime example.
Yeah.
I've got one who's a prime example. And so if we don't live in this academic space, we're not predisposed to the analyses associated with these assessment
I
fields.
got you, yeah.
How do we get the creative youngster and how do we get the child who's practical, like your son, to flourish in the school and not feel shunned?
I got it. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, we have to have alternatives for them. I guess you are too. I'm a big fan of schools. I was in where was it? The Dreyfus School of the Performing Arts.
Yes.
In West Palm, Florida.
Right.
I don't know, 6 months ago. And it's kind of like the movie Fame.
Right.
It's one of those. They have
musical arts school.
Yeah, I think it's like 7 buildings there. And so I was watching dance, ballet, and debate, and the arts, and that's cutting those things out is the worst thing we could do.
We do.
Yeah, I know.
We do and have done it.
But I think it's a battle you fight, by having a curriculum that you say this is what we consider to be the whole child. I think we fight, and people resonate with that because some of the people making those very, determinations have kids who aren't good. People get it. If you have kids of your own, have been around kids, you realize, okay, they're not good in the academics, but my God, the artistry of what they're doing. So the more of that we can offer. I think it's harder to do that, though, when we don't address the academics. If we have schools that still do really poorly, but I think that can be done. I think it can be done efficiently and effectively. And we see, for me, if we do that, we say, okay, look, and nobody holds the standard now of everybody's got to be at this level. The standard now is everybody has to grow, which is a legitimate standard. That's an expectation. You take my child came from a background where he or she didn't have a lot of advantages, but just make sure he or she grows. I think we can do that, and that'll, I think, open the door to say, and we want to offer this, we want to offer this, we want to offer this, we want to offer that. I think it'll actually give us more opportunity to do that. But you can't teach it all. Actually, it was at school in Beijing, that Beijing High School 80. We spent I think it was 14 days, I forgot. But we were in a lot of classrooms, and my question was, how do they get such high scores in the Gaokao? Because that's their big test. So we saw classes in Mandarin, we saw classes in English, and they were good teachers, but no better than U.S. teachers. Right. They were dedicated, but what was different was the curriculum and the review. Our math curriculum compared to theirs, ours is like that, theirs is like that. They teach a handful of things in great depth. And what that allows them to do, I use the term cumulative review. They continually go back and review. Right. And knowing a few things well allows you to attach other things more easily. It really does. So no kidding, knowing symbiosis well allows you to attach commensalism, you follow me? No kidding. Know a few things well, and that other stuff, even if you don't test it, will have, you know, the Velcro to stick on. So it's not, we're just doing it the wrong, trying to cover everything means you cover nothing.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, this is so juicy, right, by way of a conversation, right, because there is the biology textbook that's got 800 pages in it.
Yep.
The directive is to get through the 800 pages, right, without regard to the depth.
I got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Too much of what we do is driven by the materials that we use to teach. So how do we get this content knowledge, right? So my name is Irving. I'm a 5th grade teacher. I need to be doing algebra
I got it.
in 5th grade. I haven't learned it in my preparation program.
I got it.
What's the content knowledge, and how do we close that gap,
I got it.
right, on the content knowledge in order to do the depth,
Boy,
kindergarten through 12th grade, that you're advocating
these
for,
are
right?
these are good questions. I'm not talking with you anymore.
Well, baby, you rubbing off on me, man. So I'm growing up here big time. I want to be just like you.
Okay. No. Here's how you do it. And I didn't get a chance to get into this, but first of all, if you narrowed the content, and remember that we use that rubric, the 3 is the target, 2 is the simpler stuff, 4 is more complex. Each one of those require a different type of instruction, each one of those levels. So this basic stuff usually has to be taught directly. Really, direct instruction is not bad. It's got to be taught in a very systematic way to students. Now, that is the hardest type of lesson for a teacher to teach because it takes in a lot of content knowledge.
Right.
You follow me? Why does every teacher, why do all 3.3 million teachers, why do we expect every one of them to do that well? It's the hardest thing to do. So here's another cut. You know, you got your topics, you got 25 topics for Algebra 1. Each one of those has a scale. Each one of those has certain content that should be taught directly. Why not get the best teachers to present content and do that and video it, record it? And actually, Japan's lesson study movement is designed to do that. That content that should be directly taught, what they do is they loop through, they keep developing lessons, they vet them, and they were trying to create a national curriculum. Why not do that here? You know, why not a big district? You know, why couldn't you, pick your, again, all based on a handful of topics. And we know the content that has to be directly taught. Get people who are our best teachers, who know the content, know teaching, and it is direct presentation. It's not all lecture, but it is direct, direct presentation. Have them do those. Now, I'm the teacher. I want to teach. I'm not great at that. Why don't I just turn the video on and say, let's watch, Mrs. Smith, give us this presentation. And that's what makes like the Khan Academy so popular. Short little bits, bingo. So I think the day of expecting every teacher to be the great stand-in deliverer is gone because everybody can't be a great stand. That's the thing I think it takes a long time. You have to know your content so well, and I've moved to it so many times. Why do we expect every teacher to do that? When they're out there, state of Mississippi probably has a whole bunch of incredible Algebra 1 teachers. You could identify the content. Let's get them virtually recorded and let teachers use that. So that takes the load of the content knowledge off of me. Now I become more, I gotta know my content, but not at the level to put it together into this well-crafted lesson. I have to know my content so I can interact with the students, and I'm a good facilitator. And then you add students helping one another. Yeah, so now, so you're right. That's a huge, the way we have the system set up, every teacher has to be great at everything. Yeah. And direct instruction is the hardest thing to be good at.
And so I'm going to, this is my last question, then I'm going to open this up and get some folks out in the audience to ask you some questions. But in the recent books and in other books that you've authored, you talk about micro-teaching.
Yeah.
And this conversation about direct instruction, the best teachers doing the best instruction, suggests to me micro-teaching. What is that? Can you tell us what micro-teaching is all about?
Yeah, actually, I think it was Hattie's 6th rank variable. It's in the top 10, I know that. It was the highest ranked instructional variable, it really was. And micro-teaching, actually about 30 years old, it was a method of teacher preparation, which I kind of described. You picked a very few things to work on Okay, and then you were given feedback on those very, very specific strategies. So the way it would play out is that, I mean, kind of that, although they don't call it micro-teaching anymore, at least that I know of, you know, I would be working on 2 or 3 strategies. You'd come into my class and observe me, or you'd videotape me, you know, and then you'd sit down with me and we'd critique not just my whole general lesson. Okay, Bob, you were using Don Ogle's KWL strategy. Let's how you just, so that, you know, it's that level of focus. And that's where the whole teacher evaluation conversation comes in. Teacher evaluation should be about, you know, very few things to get that 7.5 here, 7.5, 85% here. But now for development, each of us are working on very specific things and at a micro level. And you get coaching buddies, you come in and observe me, we pick the same thing. You know, you're more senior to me in terms of your teaching, you know, so you critique me, and you critique me honestly, you know, and I'm okay with that because I know I'm not good at it. Right. You know, I asked you for help. Again, I think it was the 6th rated variable out of 150 variables. And nobody talks about it. I said, my guys, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? Yeah. That if you want to improve teaching, why don't we adapt some aspects of micro-teaching?
So thank you. Let me ask if some of you out there have a question that you'd like to pose to the good Dr. Marzano. Please. It's a passport to lunch. Trust me. Yes, ma'am.
If you go from the perspective of there are some moral absolutes when it comes to teaching, things that you just have to have in place.
Got it.
Let's start from scratch. You walk into a building that's brand new and you get to make all the rules.
Okay.
What are 5 absolutes you have to have in place immediately?
Let me repeat that.
Yeah,
right?
please do that.
The question from our colleague is, we're opening a brand new building, nothing is there, there's some moral imperatives. Will the 5 absolutes Dr. Marzano thinks should be in place?
I'm not sure if
Is that a fair representation, madam? Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure if it'll just be 5. But see, I'm going to go to the model here, and I'll acknowledge, but and I'll start with the motivation. See, you know, you start with the environment, the context, and that is students have to feel safe, they have to feel welcome, and if I'm running the school, they have to be inspired. That's got to be there. Okay, next level up would be you have to have a lean and mean curriculum. I'd also say you have to have a system of assessment that is not just paper pencil driven, you know, that gets at more ways of looking at how students are doing, including, you know, student forms of self-assessment. And I think I'm up to 4. The last one would be for my school. I want to make sure they're working on a project of their own design. Yeah, really. We used to do that with capstone projects. Yep. Which they still do at the college.
Yeah, capstone-based learning.
Yeah, you know, but it has to be student-driven. I have to be the one to select, and I don't care what it is. I don't care if a student says, I want to be a rock star. Great, go for it. And I don't care if they're researching Madonna or Lady Gaga, whatever it is, how they got there. It's something they're passionate about, and they're going for it. Because I know what's going to happen is we're taking care of the academics for them. We're taking care of the.
Good. Another question. Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure if I got it. Yeah, I think the question is, based on what you've just commented on, is it did you call it the scale that he used? The proficiency scale that you shared?
Okay.
Right? Does that connect with what you've just described? Is that fair?
Yeah, I would have, yeah, sure. See, I said a handful of topics. You know, what I would add to that is the topics are in some type of proficiency scale. You know, or some people call them, or you can use the term rubric, whatever you want. But the problem with just having a single statement, you know, so a lot of schools have their essentials, but the problem is it's just one thing. You know, so there's no way of indicating, yeah, you're getting closer, and what I'm looking for here is the inherent motivation a student has when they say, I'm not there yet, but I've moved from here to here. That's what a proficiency scale is for. It's really a motivational device. They can see I'm getting a little bit closer. Yeah, for me, it's key, and I've done proficiency scales since 1990. I just can't make it work without them. Honestly, can't. Not well.
Yes, sir.
This scale is based off just going from lower level skills to higher level skills.
So if I can repeat the question so all can hear it, say it.
I think it's based on from low level skills.
Right.
Yeah.
The question about the proficiency scales, is it a range from low-level skills to high-level skills related to a specific topic?
Yes. Okay, yeah. In some, it depends on whether you've got procedural knowledge or declarative, though, it really is. Procedural knowledge is a skill or process. Declarative knowledge is information. If you have a scale that's built on information, there's a real identifiable progression. You can like use Bloom's taxonomy if you want, or any taxonomy. There's a bunch of taxonomy. Where usually what you're looking for, the three, is an understanding of a principle or generalization, something like that. And the level 2 stuff is more like basic facts, basic terminology. Going above and beyond that is some application. You know, you create your own generalization and defend it. It's a little trickier with procedural knowledge, because procedural knowledge gets more complex when you add more procedures. The writing process is an example of that, because the writing process is a whole bunch of procedures that are embedded. You know, there's one procedure called, do I have an overall logic? There's another procedure that's called, do I have transitions from one paragraph to another? There's another procedure that says, how's about my word choice? You know, am I using, you know, varied words? So there's probably, I don't know, a whole bunch, 10 maybe procedures that are operating. So the way you make writing more difficult is start with the simple, where you're saying, look, just give me 5 paragraphs. That's what I'm looking for here. And then next time you add to it 5 paragraphs with good transitions. Next time, you follow me? Yeah, so they're not different cognitive levels. The load on procedural knowledge is when you have a whole bunch of procedures operating in concert. That's the load. So a slightly different logic. But yes, it is a progression from simple to complex. That's the whole idea.
Another question. These are really good.
How about when's lunch? Is that?
How about when's lunch? Pam Shaw, when's lunch?